Hello guys, and welcome to this new video for the first round of the FIDE World Chess Cup 2015 in Baku. And today we'll watch the game between Shakhriyar Mamedyarov from Azerbaijan. So he's playing in his home country in this World Cup. He's facing Fabiano Caruana, which is playing worse for the last year. I mean, I was thinking in 2014 he could be a very good contender and one of the guys that could beat Carlsen in a match if he would win the candidates. But lately, I have to say I'm pretty deceived by his play. I mean, he's still among the top 10 best player in the world, but it's not even clear he's top 3, top 4 anymore by the level. But while he's really young, and it could just be a bad period for him. So let's start. So d4, knight f6, c4, and bishop g6 and bishop g5. So this is not the Trompovsky, this is a little subline, I don't know the name of this one. The Trompovsky is when you go bishop g5 immediately after knight f6. So this is a Trompovsky. A lot of moves are available for black, from e6, knight e4, d5, g6. I mean, we have a lot of them. But he went c4, g6, bishop g5, and he changed a lot of things, because after knight f4, bishop f4, c5, the difference is that now the queen might land on a5 to give a check, and white is not able anymore to cover the check by pawn c3. He would have to cover by either knight c3, knight d2, bishop d2, or queen d2. Well, now queen d2 would be a bad move because he would be losing the queen against the knight. So he goes queen to c2, attacking the knight. Now black goes knight a5 check, and we go knight to d2. Pawn to f5, protecting the knight. Pawn to f3, attacking the knight. And here black decides to bring the knight back. So if he takes on d2, white would just take back, the queen goes backward, and we can maybe even play the move d5 here, or pawn take, queen takes, and bishop c3 as well. It's possible to take control of the long diagonal. So it was an option, but Caruana decides to play knight f6. It makes sense, a bit like in the Dutch now. We push the pawn and we get the knight behind. So pawn to d5, closing the center. Pawn d6, pawn e4. So white has a good control of the center. I love to play those kind of positions with white. I feel really comfortable myself, and I always tend to overestimate therefore the advantage for white. But I would say white is slightly better. I like much more to have this pawn structure, and this king might feel a bit weak at some point. Though it's really because of me. Probably someone else would just tell you it's unbalanced and close to equal. Black goes knight a6. Maybe he wants to play knight b4. So now it's bishop d3, knight b4. So you cannot play like that. Knight to e2, pawn e4, bishop g7. So developing the pieces. Knight to c3, bringing the knight to a comfortable square. So white is going to play 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to get the knight, as he could have played in just 2 moves. I mean, of course, it's just a bit of a joke, because the way he developed the pieces is just logical. Both players played a needed move, like black has knight f6, knight e4, knight f6 back. So I mean, it's no big deal, just a bit of fun. So black castles, normal, bishop e2, developing the pieces, knight to h5, strengthening the bishop. So we can see that white has still some problems to finish the development of the king, but if he could develop, I feel maybe black could be in troubles on the king side, because I mean, this knight on a6 is a bit far away, and this bishop as well. So I mean, it's not easy to bring it to defend the king. So if white could exchange those 2 bishops at some point, maybe black would be in trouble. Though if black plays actively, I mean, it's no big deal. Now white plays bishop g5, strengthening the pawn, and black is playing queen d8. I think it's a bit too passive. But if black goes knight to f4, so attacking the pawn and the bishop, so white could, by example, castle, knight e2, bishop to g4. I feel that by exchanging this knight and developing the bishop finally, black is kind of settling an interesting position for himself. So the position is close, so those two knights might be a bit better than the two bishops. But I mean, very complicated game coming. This knight on a6 is looking a bit weird on c7, because even if it goes to on a6, even if it goes to c7, it doesn't hit a lot of squares, so it should probably goes back to f6, because if you go on b4 as well, you don't have landing squares, and after pawn to a3, I mean, if you go knight b4 after pawn to a3, you would have to come back to a6. So black has problem with this knight. Still an unbalanced position. I like the fact that black could trade some pieces here, because it makes the game more simple for him, as the bishop is looking great on the long diagonal. But black went queen to d8. It's a move I don't really like. I mean, just bringing a developed piece back to its home square. A passive square also. Now the rook has problem to come to f8, so the queen is unlinking the rooks, and you still have this problem with this knight. So now white goes bishop h5, pawn h5, and knight to f3. A really good move, this knight f3 move. So it's closing the door to the rook, and it's bringing a new piece to attack. And here it's more clear for white how to play. You can go castle, knight to e2, knight to g3, attacking the pawn. Maybe somehow knight f5 coming, some queen d2, bishop h6 as well. Maybe rook e1 and e5. So the white plan is pretty clear. It's not that easy for black and that obvious for black to play here. So he goes pawn to h6, bishop e3. So he's rightly kicking the bishop away, and has this chance to play king h7 to double protect the h7 square. Black goes bishop g4. So he's developing the pieces, castle, and pawn to e6. Here, I think that bishop takes f3, pawn takes f3, and queen c8 was better, simply because he exchanged some pieces, and now king h7, rook g8 is starting to content the g file. Though he didn't play like that, probably because he was afraid of the f4, e5 coming at him, and this knight on a6 is well, it's the problem of the game. So maybe a better way to play. He went pawn to e6, controlling the center, queen d2. So we are starting to watch at h6. Also now after knight b4, black is not attacking anything. King h7 and rook a d1. So the idea of rook a d1 might be that after queen e7, pawn d6, queen e6, queen e7, sorry. So after queen e7, I just lost myself in the analysis. So after pawn e6, queen d6, black has the move bishop to d4, cutting the connection between the queen and the rook. And now black is winning an exchange, because if bishop d4, queen takes d4, winning a queen. So white goes rook d4, pawn d4, queen d4, and well, it's 2 pawns for the exchange. A very complicated game. But the thing after rook d1, queen e7, so it's the logical move. White doesn't take on e6, he goes e5, and after pawn takes e5, white goes pawn to d6, by example queen d7 and knight to e4, and now he gave up a pawn, but the pawns are fixed, so the bishop now is looking stupid at his own pawn, and this is favorable for white, because we have this strong e4 square, and the pawn structure, I mean, it's giving up pawn for squares, so we gave up the pawn, the e pawn, to get the e4 square, and the king is looking bad. The pawn on d6 is a giant, and those pawns are falling. I mean, the pawn on e5 can't be protected for long, so white has a good advantage. So it's not that easy to play. because queen e7 would be the obvious move to save the threat, because the threat is still pawn takes and queen d6. So queen e7 would be a logical move, but it's not available now. And black decides so to close the door with the pawn e5. So now the difference is the bishop became even worse. So now we have two very bad pieces for black, the bishop and the knight. So the bishop is a good defender, but the diagonal is absolutely closed. And white is even glad because the position as it's closed, he lost the light square bishop was exchanged for the knight. So it makes its advantage even stronger because now the knight is clearly better than the bishop. White goes now rook f2. So we want to use the f5, of course. Knight c7, rook f1. So now the rook are doubled. Rook to b8, searching for counterplay on the queen side, but it seems to be a bit too late. h3, bishop d7. Knight to e2 now, bringing the knight to g3. So as we said, we have to bring all the pieces on the king side. So the queen side counter attack maybe is coming for black. He goes pawn to h4. So defending the g3 square. King to h2. White is preparing g3. And here black goes pawn to b6. This is a move I can't understand. I mean, it's not doing anything. I would say if you push the b pawn, at least play pawn b5. Search for counterplay. Pawn b6 is just strangeness for me. But here for black is in kind of a zugzwang somehow. I tried a few moves. By example, if you go knight to e8 to bring your knight back to f6, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, isn't it? It's made by knight g5 check, pawn g5, and rook takes f8. So it means the move knight e8 is unplayable. Now, if you go queen e7, by example, developing your queen, it's made by bishop c5, pawn c5, and pawn to d6. So white is even getting a better advantage as now we have the d5 support for the knight, and we are even a pawn up after knight h4. So we are winning a pawn, and I mean, the knights are coming, one to d5, the other one to f5, and we will stay with the knight against the g7 bishops, the dark square bishops that can't look at any diagonals. So this is pretty much game over. So with the move queen e7 unavailable, the move knight e8, which would be the most logical move unavailable as well. I don't know what black could do, but at least try pawn to b5 and search for some counterplay, because pawn to b6, I can't even see your idea. I mean, is it bishop c8, bishop a6, which would just be met by pawn to b3? And anyway, you would have to play b5 later on. So it's hard to understand the move. White continues g3, attacking the pawn. So black treads the pawn, the knight comes. So now everybody, all the white pieces are looking at the king side. Really everybody is looking over there. Rook to g8. So now knight to h5 coming to squares. So now the bishop is attacked, and if the bishop falls, the pawn on h6 falls. Black goes knight e8. So this was the idea behind rook f8 to bring the knight back. Knight g7, bishop to h6. So we took the bad bishop of black, but he was a defender of the king, and now with the pawn h6, so we are winning a pawn, and we continue the attack, with taking a pawn even. Black goes knight to h5. White goes knight to g5 checks. So now, if black takes the bishop, it's met by knight f7 check, winning the queen. So black can't take the bishop. He goes king to g6. It's the only move in fact, because after king h8, it's exactly the same story. Knight f7. So black goes king g6. White goes rook g1. So the king doesn't have squares anymore. Somehow. He's cut from all the square he has, and he cannot take the bishop again because of knight f7. Black goes king e7. Knight f7 check now, forcing the king back to h7. Bishop to g5, threatening the queen. The queen goes to e8. So now white could at least take the pawn on d6, but he goes first queen to e2, threatening the knight. So now if you go knight f4, white goes probably bishop f4, threatening queen h5 checkmate. Rook takes g1, queen h5 check. Something must work over there. I didn't watch that. This inspiration came to me afterward. King g7, bishop h6 check, king to g8, and rook and king takes g1 by example, being a piece up, because the queen, when it comes to the check, it defends the knight. So black cannot go knight f4, as he would lose material. He goes knight g7. White goes rook to f6 now, threatening rook h6 checkmate. Rook f8, rook h6 check, king to g8, bishop to f6, adding up pressure on the g file. The knight is pinned. Rook takes f7 and queen to h5 now. This is the last move of the attack, and rook h8 checkmate is coming on the next move. Black can't stop that. He just has to resign. I mean, you just don't have a move to stop rook h8, sorry. It's checkmate on the next move. If you would go rook takes f6, it would just go rook h8 checkmate. And, well, I mean, you can't do anything. You just can't do anything. So, a great win by Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. He will play with the black pieces on the next game, and well, he could really take Caruana out. So not the best game for Fabiano, but as I said, it's quite a long time we don't see him play his top chess. So let's see if he can find some resources to level the game after he gets the white pieces.